back in Tyrion Cuthbert, Arcane Attorney of the Arcane, whatever the subtitle is supposed to be. So anyway, we have 3 of the cases under our belt, but there seems to be something going on with a familiar face here in Case 4, Severed Ties. So, let's start here and see what happens. Up until now, we've been following the story of Tyrion Cuthbert. We've experienced the world through his eyes and fought for justice through his soul. But this time, why don't we start from the perspective of another? Can't believe Cuthbert read the client's mind without asking. It's starting to become a problem. He's becoming more and more reckless with each passing year. I wish Freya was still alive. She would know what to do. She made it look so effortless, and he loved her. Would he have listened to her if she was still here? Is something the matter, Tamora? No, I was just thinking about something. Well, the trial's about to begin. I don't doubt your abilities, but I'd still appreciate it if you remain focused. All of our futures are at stake, after all. Of course, Miss Frega. Occupation freelancer. Beatrice takes in a deep breath before she claps her hands together. What's wrong? Nothing, it's just a ritual I use to calm myself. Right, I suppose we all deal with stress differently. But more importantly, what are you doing here? My father sent me to guide Beatrice through the courthouse. It's a new environment for her, and we were both worried about her condition. Still can't believe you were the boss's daughter this entire time. Why didn't you say anything at the academy? Oh, knowing my true identity would have caused friction with your son, wouldn't it? He's not my... Anyways, I suppose I understand why you stayed quiet, but I still don't appreciate being kept in the dark about this. Oh, speak of the devil. You spot Cuthbert and McCoy walk into the courtroom with the other members of the gallery. McCoy spots you and gives a friendly yet awkward smile. However, Cuthbert ignores you entirely and walks silently into the courtroom. Parental troubles? We had an argument earlier. It's nothing to worry about. If you say so. You are wary about what he saw in Beatrice's mind, though. He's always been a good kid, but his idealistic sense of justice clouds his judgment sometimes. You just hope that he's not planning to do anything reckless. The trial is about to begin. Do you really have the time to be making small talk here? Prosecutor Steelman approaches the 3 of you. But she appears to be accompanied by someone else. Nightgrave, is that you? What are you doing here? Well, he's accompanying me as my aide for this case. I see, so I assume you'll be prosecuting? Of course. I would never pass up the opportunity to face the infamous Ruby Tymora. Really, if I recall correctly, you haven't even beaten Tyrion once so far. Miss Steelman, don't strain yourself. What's that look for, Beatrice? You almost look surprised to see me here. Considering the circumstances, I thought you might recuse yourself. I am more than capable of being objective, especially for a case of this much importance. Well, I hope your mind is as strong as you think it is. Miss Steelman, please calm down. Oh, how I love a good reunion. Court is now in session for the trial of Beatrice Frega. Miss Steelman, is the prosecution ready? Miss Steelman? Oh, of course. The prosecution is ready, Your Honor. The defense is also ready, Your Honor. Something seems off about her today. Is her personal attachment to this case distracting her? Very well, let's begin the proceedings. Prosecutor Steelman, could you please list the charges? Your Honor, the defendant is charged with first-degree murder and grand theft. As many of you know, Beatrice Frega is the formerly missing daughter of the now late William Frega. And the victim of the murder is William Frega himself. Yes, I am well aware of that. The people of Wyverngard will certainly mourn the loss of House Frega's head. Please, the only people mourning him are the banking house's shareholders. But anyways, did you also say that the defendant is accused of grand theft? Yes, Your Honor. The crimes took place during the Lord's Ball, an event that was hosted in Frega Manor yesterday evening. The Heraldson Hall of History had a gallery display within the manor. They were showcasing several magical artifacts donated to the Wyvern Guard Historical Society. One of these items was the Sword of Spell Eating, a magical artifact that allows its wielder to nullify magical effects. So, they just tell you it's an ancient artifact. When wielded by a creature, that creature and anything connected to them physically or magically are immune to all magical effects. Legends say it was forged through a blood contract between a mage and a demon. We, the prosecution, believe that the defendant stole this item. She then used it to nullify the magical lock on the victim's study. After breaking into the study, she attacked the victim and slashed his throat open using a letter opener. He died of blood loss shortly after. So we have the autopsy report for William Frege. 3:12 a.m. Carotid artery severed. Several scratch marks on the face and back. Illusion magic on the body. I see. But what possible motive would the defendant have to murder her own father? William Frege and his daughter were not close. To say that they had a strained relationship would be an understatement. In fact, 5 years prior to the murder, Beatrice abandoned and fled her home. She went into hiding and did not contact any of her friends or family. Her whereabouts were unknown until she suddenly contacted her father a week ago. My client left the Frege household because of her toxic relationship with her father. She wanted to create a life for herself that was free from his influence and abuse. I won't disagree with your claims, but that just highlights how desperate the defendant must have been. She had clearly fallen on hard times and begrudgingly contacted her father for financial aid. I can't possibly understand why they would schedule this meeting during the Lord's Ball. But nevertheless, several witnesses did see her that night. And these same witnesses saw her storming out of her father's study in anger. Her father must have refused her request for gold, so she decided to murder him to claim his inheritance. Luckily, we prepared for this in advance. Yes, they're playing right into her hands. So we have the inheritance clue. Beatrice fled 5 years ago into hiding. William told Miriam, that's the fencer, the one who had the sword in the second case, that he would remove Beatrice from his will. As a result, she wouldn't receive any inheritance. And Miriam Frege will confirm that in court. What you're saying is all conjecture, Steelwind. You don't have any evidence or testimony that confirms what they spoke about. Yes, I'm well aware that you and your client have refused to tell us what was discussed during that meeting. But as long as you both stay silent, my claims are plausible. Be honest, Steelwind. Do you seriously think that my client committed these crimes in spite of her condition? Condition? What do you mean by that, Miss Timora? Why don't you tell him, Steelwind? Tell the court about my client's disability. Your Honor, Beatrice Frege is considered legally disabled. However, legally disabled? That's a convenient way of putting it, Steelwind. My client isn't just legally disabled. She's completely blind. Completely blind? Is this true? We have several medical documents and testimony from several... I've never heard that word before. Chirurgeons? I assume it's supposed to be like key surgeons, but I don't know what they're trying to say on that one. Attesting to that fact, my client is unable to see anything. Beatrice is blind. What is the meaning of this, Miss Steelwind? Do you expect me to believe that a blind woman performed any of the acts you're accusing her of? I'm glad you also see how ridiculous these claims are, Your Honor. If the court would just let me elaborate... Steelwind, the prosecution's first charge is grand theft. My client would have needed to break into a magically secured display case. Performing such an act would be a difficult task for anyone, much less my client. And the second charge is first-degree murder. My client would have needed to use the Sword of Spell Eating on the lock leading to the victim's study. Then she would have needed to grab a letter opener, overpower the victim, and deliver a precise and fatal blow to the victim's neck. Does any of that sound like a reasonable theory, Your Honor? I'm compelled to agree with you, Miss Timora. It all sounds quite ludicrous, to be perfectly honest. This is just awful. The Steelwinds are clearly just attacking the Fregas now that their head is deceased.
Objection!
Enough. Your Honor, the court has not seen the evidence that supports this case, nor have you listened to the Inquisition's testimony regarding their investigation. Until you have done so, you are in no position to pass judgment. Very well, Miss Steelwind. I suppose you have a point. Guess the young lady has some claws after all. But it doesn't matter. Their case against Beatrice is questionable at best. Frankly, it's surprising that Steelwind even went through with this. It's only a matter of time before the judge sees things your way. And now here's the twist on why she brought a necromancer. To begin, the prosecution would like to call Commander Orem White to the stand. Commander White, please testify to the court about the Inquisition's findings. Right. So do I actually have to do this, or is it all on autopilot? We didn't want to cause panic after the sword was stolen, so we activated the manor's silent security system. It put an anti-magic field over the entire manor. We did a search of the house, and we found the stolen sword in the defendant's bedroom. It didn't look like she was going to run, and Crown Prince asked her to stand down, so we just kept a close eye on her. William Frege was in a bad mood that night, so he had already locked himself inside his study. An hour later, we entered the study and found him lying dead in a pool of blood. The lock was still engaged, and no one teleported in. The perp must have temporarily disabled the lock using the sword dispel eating. We have testimonies that say the defendant was seriously in debt. She must have murdered the victim to get a part of his inheritance. Their case against Beatrice is just as you predicted, and you already have a countermeasure to disprove the existence of any motive. All you have to do is present that to the court. So, what do we have in our pocket? So we have the blindness, the sword, the autopsy report. So right there we have the thing about the inheritance, which she's probably referring to. We didn't want to cause any panic after the sword was stolen, so we activated the manor's silent security system and put an anti-magic field over the entire manor. Wait, doesn't the sword make the wielder immune to magical effects? An anti-magic field would have only disempowered everyone except the thief. Yeah, well, we didn't know what the sword could do until after the investigation. Up until then, we thought it was just a dusty old artifact. Seems pretty negligent. Are you sure you're qualified for your position, Orem? The situation was unprecedented for everyone involved. One could hardly expect an ancient artifact to have magical capabilities. Anyways, what did you do after the theft, Commander? We did a search of the house and found the stolen sword in the defendant's bedroom. That's how we know it was her. Seems like a strange conclusion to jump to. My client hadn't stepped foot into the Frege Manor in years. After being gone for so long, her bedroom had to have been repurposed for something else. Not sure about the details, but one of the defendant's sisters refused to let the servants disturb that room. Guess she was hoping that her sister would come back one day. How am I supposed to pronounce that name? Leify? It didn't look like she was going to run, and Crown Prince asked her to stand down, so we just kept a close eye on her. And why would the prince tell you to stand down, Orem? Well, Crown Prince Aster knew the defendant well. He was confident that she wasn't going to flee the scene. Are you sure he just knew her well? If I recall correctly, the prince is still very adamant about her innocence. The Crown Prince is vouching for the defendant? Is this true, Miss Steeland? It is, however. I believe that the evidence found throughout the investigation proves the contrary. Are you sure your judgment isn't simply being clouded by your jealousy? Your fiancé was previously engaged to my client, after all. You're enjoying this a bit too much. William Frege was in a bad mood that night, so he already locked himself inside his study. Did anyone see him enter the study? A few people. One of them was Lefay Frege, the victim's second daughter. She said that he was really irritated that night, so he went into his study for some peace and quiet. I guess his meeting with the defendant put him in a bad mood. But if the manor was covered in an anti-magic field, how did he lock the door magically? Not sure how, but the locks in the manor aren't affected by anti-magic fields. How? The magical locks generate a smaller anti-magic field around themselves. The two fields cancel each other out. It's like multiplying two negative numbers together. I'm gonna be honest, I have no understanding of these things. So I just want to make sure that this is Ruby talking to Beatrice there. Is what she's saying true, Beatrice? Yes. Overlapping anti-magic fields are a well-studied phenomenon. You'll just have to take her word for it. An hour later, we entered the study and found him lying dead in a pool of blood. Who was the person that discovered the body? The same person who saw him last, his daughter, Lefay Frega. Lefay Frega. Like, I've never seen that name before, so I have to look at it, I guess. I don't know. I'm also trying to think of, like, what the meaning of some of these names are, because I mentioned Iris before, but I haven't gone into a lot of detail about some of the others. Poor Lefay. That must have been traumatizing for her. Did anyone else accompany Lefay when she happened upon the body? Yeah, supposedly one of the servants got himself locked in a nearby storage closet, and he heard the violent attack through one of the air vents. When he finally got out, he told Lefay and they went into the study accompanied by some knights. The lock was still engaged and no one teleported in. The perp must have temporarily disabled the lock using something like the Sword of Spell Eating. This sword is integral to the case against my client, so why is the description of its capabilities so vague? To be honest, the sword is magic, but it doesn't seem to behave like any spells we know about. And we can't identify its magic like we usually do with the artificery devices. According to Lord Haraldson, its powers are demonic in nature. But if you ask me, it's all a bunch of hooey. Anyways, it's obvious that it doesn't follow the normal rules of magic. Wait, what? What is it, Miss Timora? It's nothing. Cuthbert is watching from the gallery, so he must have heard that too. Could the Eye of Horus have something to do with demons? No, focus on acquitting the client first. You can worry about Cuthbert later. Either way, we've tested the sword's magic on similar locks. When used correctly, it is capable of disabling the lock on Lord Frega's study. We have testimonies that say the defendant was seriously in debt. She must have murdered the victim to get a part of his inheritance. You have testimonies. Wouldn't an artificial record be more valid evidence? Miss Timora, you and I both know that your client's creditors are not the type to keep such records. So you're admitting that you're relying on hearsay. One could conclude that. But it doesn't matter if we can prove that this debt exists. The Frega estate is unimaginably vast. Debt or no debt, that amount of wealth would be a tempting boon to any individual. She has a point. House Frega owns all of the banking houses in Wyverngard. People can only dream of having that much power and wealth. The prosecution's case against Beatrice is already really weak. You're not even sure why they bothered bringing this to trial in the first place. And you already have testimony from someone else that directly contradicts the commander's testimony. Once you present that to the court, this case is as good as yours.
Objection!
Your Honor, the prosecution's case against my client is riddled with holes, and the prosecution's proposed motive is the largest among them. What do you mean, Miss Timora? Of all the elements in this case, the motive is the most believable. Your client would have had much to gain through her father's inheritance. That may be, but that's assuming my client had anything to inherit at all. What? Your Honor, my client fled from her psychologically abusive father 5 years ago. How do you think he would have reacted to that? Lord Frega was a petty and vindictive man. Do you honestly think that he'd leave his inheritance to someone who disobeyed him so egregiously? No, he'd do everything in his power to make sure she didn't see a shred of his wealth. Yes, we're already well aware of this. The moment she slams her cane down, you notice the prosecutor wince a little, but she quickly hides it or regains her composure. On the night of the murder, the victim made the decision to disinherit the defendant. However, his murder deprived him of the opportunity to submit his will to his attorney. This only further proves the defendant's motive. She would have needed to act quickly, lest her father submit the changed will. I'm afraid you're mistaken, Steelwind. William Frega didn't disinherit my client that night. He disinherited my client 5 years ago. I have witnessed testimony from Miriam Frega, William's youngest daughter. By her own admission, her father disinherited my client shortly after she fled the household. What? She never brought that up during questioning. Perhaps she's not as amicable to you as you thought. If you don't believe me, why don't we call her to the stand and ask her ourselves? What are you planning, Miss Timora? I have no idea what you're talking about. Well, it's clear that we won't get anywhere until we hear from Miriam directly. Bailiff, please escort Miriam Fraga to the stand. So here's another familiar face for everyone. Miriam, is the defense correct? Did your father disinherit Beatrice 5 years ago? Yes. And you didn't think it was necessary to share this information with me? Well, you never asked. If I recall correctly, you also were tight-lipped during your questioning this morning. Are you staying quiet for your sister's sake? The witness just lost her father. You can hardly expect her to recall every detail that's relevant to the case. Which raises a more concerning question. How did you extract this information? Who knows, maybe I just have a way with people. Regardless, I suppose you have a point. I'll give the witness the benefit of the doubt, for now. In any case, Miriam, please testify to the court about how you found out about Beatrice's disinheritance. Yes, of course. One day, we all woke up and discovered that Beatrice had fled from her home. She left a note for us, and in it she renounced her name and denounced my father. My father later called me and my sister into his study. He told us that he'd completely disowned Beatrice and removed any claim she had to the Frigga estate. It was probably a threat to us in case we ever chose to go down the same path she did. He wanted to make an example out of her. This all happened 5 years ago. And are you sure this all happened 5 years ago? Yes, even now I can remember everything clearly. I see. Her speech is getting slower. Is she deep in thought? Nightgrave seems extremely concerned for some reason. And Leafy was there with you at this meeting. Yes, she was. However, Leafy couldn't have possibly been there. Her words are getting more slurred. You also notice that her balance is slightly swaying. Hey, are you okay? Of course, What? By the Skilled Lord, is that blood? Blood? Bailiff, find anyone capable of casting healing magic. Escort them to the courtroom immediately. That's why Wallace was there. He was keeping her glued together, I bet. After some scrambling, a couple of healers are able to help Nightgrave stabilize the prosecutor. In all the chaos, you caught a glimpse of her. There were deep wounds and blood on several parts of her body. She must have used some kind of illusion to hide them, but her disguise has completely dissipated now. Before Steelman is taken out of the courtroom, you catch her whispering something into Nightgrave's ear. You see a look of confusion from him, but he nods and makes his way to the witness stand. But not before passing a message on to the bailiff, who seems equally confused. Just what the hell is going on? Mr. Nightgrave, explain yourself. What is going on? Why was Miss Steelman so gravely injured? I'm sorry, but I wasn't actually here as Miss Steelman's aide. I was here as her healer. Her healer? The truth is, Miss Steelman was violently attacked at noon today. She was in critical condition, but she insisted on prosecuting the case anyways. I owed her a favor, and she asked me to channel my necromancy to keep her wounds closed during the trial. Scaled Lord, why didn't she just recuse herself? She must have known. If anyone else tried to prosecute Beatrice, he would have handily won the trial. Nevertheless, she showed up to prosecute because no one else would. And she did it all despite the risk to her life. It almost makes you respect her a little. Almost. Anyways, is there any need to prolong this trial, Your Honor? What? Even you must acknowledge how weak the case against my client is. In addition to that, Miriam's testimony shows that my client had nothing to gain from her father's death. Miss Timora, Miss Steelman has been gravely injured. And you're still only concerned about? The only thing I'm concerned about is seeking justice for my client. Even so, we cannot move forward until we find another prosecutor. And how long do you think that will take, Your Honor? It's almost been 12 hours since the murder took place. That gives us, what, 36 hours? After that, every magical trace at the crime scene will fully disappear. But there might be someone... If Steelin had simply allowed another prosecutor to work this case, we wouldn't be in this situation. She took a risk, and now she has to pay the price. Wouldn't you agree, Your Honor? You're not exactly proud of winning this way, but this is what it takes to win, and you won't let an opportunity like this pass you by. The judge is clearly unhappy with this turn of events, but it's out of his hands now. Well, due to today's unprecedented events, I suppose I have no choice. And they're missing the I there, because it said I suppose have. There aren't any prosecutors available to immediately take Miss Steelin's place. We will take a brief recess. After that, I'll deliver my verdict.
Objection!
And here's the new prosecutor. Your Honor, I'm afraid you can't pass a verdict just yet. Mr. Cuthbert? Cuthbert? What the hell are you doing? I don't know. But what I do know is that there was a massive contradiction in Miriam Frega's testimony. It looks like things aren't going to be as simple as you expected.